You think you've learned, you promise yourself never again. And yet, there you are, once more, sitting in the aftermath of another connection that felt like a beginning but ended like a warning, a relationship that started with sparks and ended in silence. It's a cycle you didn't choose, but one that keeps choosing you. And you start to wonder, why? Why do the same kinds of people keep showing up? Different names, same patterns. Why does the universe keep sending you people who unravel you, drain you, challenge your peace, before it ever sends someone who builds, nurtures, or truly sees you? Let's tell the truth no one wants to admit. Sometimes it feels like the universe is punishing you, like it's playing some cruel joke, offering you just enough hope to get hurt again. But that's not the truth. The truth is harder and far more powerful. These people, the ones who leave scars instead of love letters, weren't sent to destroy you. They were sent to reveal you. Because you weren't ready for the love you want until you saw who you became in the love you accepted. This isn't about blame. This is about awakening. The universe doesn't waste experiences. The pain you endured wasn't random. It was precise, timed, necessary. These weren't wrong people by accident. They were the right people for who you were before you knew better. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And until you see that, you'll stay trapped in a loop, hoping the next person is different, while still carrying the same inner wounds. The pattern isn't the punishment, it's the mirror. And once you understand that, everything changes. Carl Jung said it best. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that fate, it shows up in human form, in the eyes of lovers who trigger you, in the words of partners who awaken your deepest insecurities, in the arms of the people who walk away just when you needed them to stay. These people, yes, those people, aren't here by mistake. They are the universe's mirror, and mirrors never lie. You meet them and feel something you can't explain, a pull, a fire, a familiarity that's almost eerie. But what feels like magic at first quickly becomes chaos. You find yourself reacting, overthinking, shrinking, wondering why love feels more like survival. But what's really happening is this. You're not falling in love. You're confronting your shadow. They are showing you everything you haven't healed, everything you've avoided, every wound you've layered over with busy schedules, casual flings, and forced smiles. They arrive carrying the exact energy needed to break the illusion, and they do. Brutally, beautifully, without even meaning to. You thought they were the one, but they were the reflection, the embodiment of your blind spots, the echo of your unspoken beliefs, the physical form of every unprocessed emotion you buried to keep functioning. They come to tear down the version of love you were taught so you can discover the version that's true. And it's not kind, not gentle, but it is sacred. Because here's the secret most never tell you. We don't meet people by accident. We meet them by alignment, even the painful ones, especially the painful ones. And the moment you stop seeing them as curses and start seeing them as catalysts, you begin the real work. The work of integration, of awakening, of finally saying, I see you, I see me. And from that moment forward, your life is no longer dictated by the unconscious. It becomes a choice, a path, a process of becoming whole, not in spite of the wrong people, but because of them. They didn't look like a lesson. That's what made it so confusing. They felt like home at first, like someone who finally saw you. But as time unfolded, what they really did was expose everything you hadn't yet dared to face. The wrong people don't show up waving red flags. They show up wearing the perfect mask, one shaped by your fantasies, your unmet needs, your silent hopes. But underneath, they are your shadow in disguise. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow as the parts of ourselves we reject or repress, the anger, the neediness, the fear of abandonment, the hunger for validation. And what we bury within, life brings to the surface through others. The people we fall hardest for often represent our deepest fractures. That's why the connection feels so intense, so consuming. It's not just love, It's recognition. It's the unconscious meeting itself in human form. You think they hurt you. But they didn't create the wound, they activated it. And in doing so, they made it visible. These aren't mistakes. These are sacred echoes of what still needs to be healed. They show you the love you were taught to settle for, the emotional scraps you learned to survive on, the belief that to be loved, you must earn it, prove it, suffer for it. When you look back, it won't be their betrayal that lingers. It'll be the realization of how long you betrayed yourself trying to keep them. That's the real heartbreak. But it's also the beginning of clarity, because once you see that they were never your desire, only your wound looking for a resolution, you no longer need to repeat the cycle. You stop chasing shadows, and you start becoming whole. Comfort never questions you, never confronts your patterns, never asks you to look deeper, but pain. It demands a response. It shakes you. It interrupts the story you've been telling yourself about who you are and what you deserve. And the wrong people? They are the vessels pain travels through. They don't come to love you. They come to wake you. At first it feels cruel, unfair. You were open. You tried. You gave more than you had. And they still left. Or worse, they stayed just long enough to hollow you out. But something shifted in that heartbreak, didn't it? Something broke open inside you, and for the first time, you questioned why you were willing to accept so little just to feel something. That's the awakening. Because comfort is a lullaby. It keeps you asleep. But pain? Pain is an alarm. It doesn't whisper. It screams. It doesn't settle. It disrupts. And in that disruption, you're forced to choose. Go numb and repeat, or rise and evolve. That moment, when the tears stop feeling helpless and start feeling holy, that's when you know. The pain served its purpose. You're not just grieving the loss of them. You're grieving the version of you that didn't know better, that still believed chaos was love, that clung to patterns disguised as passion, and that grief, it's sacred, because it means you're changing. We don't awaken when everything goes right. We awaken when everything falls apart, when our illusions collapse, when the comfort is ripped away and we're left raw, exposed, and real. And in that space, stripped of who we thought we needed to be, we begin to touch something deeper, something true. So no, the pain wasn't punishment. It was initiation. And the people who hurt you? They weren't villains. They were mirrors, messengers, midwives of your rebirth. And now, you're no longer asleep. There's a reason certain people feel magnetic to you, a reason you keep falling for the same types in different skins. It's not fate. It's not chemistry. It's memory. Not the conscious kind, but the kind that lives in your emotional DNA. You're not choosing freely. You're responding to a blueprint written long before you had a say. These wrong people? They're not random. They're archetypes your soul still thinks it needs. The savior who promises to rescue you from emptiness. The rebel who makes your heart race but disappears when it matters. The caretaker who seems safe but ends up needing more from you than you can give. You don't fall for them, you fall for what they represent. Comfort in familiarity, even if that familiarity is pain. Carl Jung knew that we carry the unconscious of our personal and collective pasts, and those unconscious stories shape who we love and how. The archetypes we chase are echoes of our parents, our childhood wounds, our earliest definitions of love. So when someone walks in and fits that role, it feels electric, meant to be. But it's not destiny. It's programming. The universe isn't sending you your person when that happens. It's sending you a reflection of who you were when your patterns were formed. These people show up to play out the drama you haven't resolved yet. That's why they trigger you. That's why they pull you in and tear you open. They don't love you in real time. They love you in a reenactment. But the beauty of this realization is that once you name the archetype, you break the spell. You see the pattern for what it is, a stage play that no longer fits your growth. And in that moment, you stop seeking heroes and start becoming your own. You stop chasing rebels and start reclaiming your peace. You stop bleeding for caretakers and start tending to yourself. Because when you evolve beyond the story, the characters lose their grip. You tell yourself it'll be different this time, that they're not like the others, that this one will stay. But halfway through, you recognize the signs, the silence, the pulling away, the way you start shrinking to stay chosen, and suddenly you're back where you swore you'd never be. Different face, same pain. It's not bad luck. It's not the universe being cruel. It's repetition, your greatest, most unrelenting teacher. Life repeats the lesson until you learn it. Not to punish you, to awaken you. The people who keep showing up in disguise, who break you in the same places, they're not here to hurt you again. They're here to show you where you're still handing over your power, where you're still confusing attention for love, where you're still abandoning yourself just to feel wanted. And here's the hard truth. Until the lesson is fully lived and integrated, the pattern continues. No matter how much you cry, no matter how much you plead, because the lesson isn't finished until your response changes, until you stop asking why they hurt you and start asking why you stayed, until you stop hoping they'll come back and start wondering why you let them in. Carl Jung believed that every repeated experience contains the seed of transformation. That's the hidden gift. What feels like a curse is often just a loop asking to be closed, and it only closes when you do something radically different, when you choose yourself before they choose you, when you leave at the first red flag instead of waiting for the whole house to burn down. You're not stuck. You're being invited again and again to rise. Every time they return in a new form, you get another chance to say, "I've outgrown this." And when you finally do, the loop breaks, the cycle ends, and life responds. Because the moment you stop dancing with your past, you start creating a future that doesn't look like pain. It's easy to say, "I want real love," but what you often seek isn't love, it's medicine. A soothing balm for the wounds you've never fully faced. That's why the wrong people come at the right time. Not because they're what you deserve, but because they match your frequency, the silent pain still humming beneath the surface. They don't see the healed you. They see the version still reaching for external validation to fix an internal fracture. Carl Jung said, "What you resist persists." And the wounds you try to outrun by being needed, by being chosen, by being perfect, don't disappear. They show up in human form. People who mimic your childhood pain, your unmet needs, your emotional hunger. Not because you asked for it, but because your unconscious did. Healing doesn't begin with desire. It begins with awareness. You attract from your wounds when you don't know they're still bleeding. You attract from your fears when you've mistaken them for instincts. That's why it feels intense, urgent, like love that needs to be saved or saved from. But real love doesn't rush in to rescue. It meets you in your wholeness. Until then, the universe sends you mirrors, not partners. These people don't come to complete you. They come to reflect what's incomplete, the parts you've hidden under strength. The versions of you still waiting to be chosen, still afraid of being alone, still believing you need to earn love. That's why you stay longer than you should. That's why you bend until you break. Because you're trying to heal a wound through someone else's acceptance. But healing doesn't come through their love. It comes through your truth. When you finally see that the love you long for must begin with you, everything shifts. You stop attracting people who mirror your wounds, and start meeting those who resonate with your peace. Your ego whispers, "Stay where it's familiar." It wants the kind of love that's easy, predictable, safe, the kind that keeps you from ever having to stretch. But your soul doesn't care about comfort. It wants truth. And truth often wears the face of pain. That's why the people who shake you, who disappoint you, who leave you wondering why, they're not here to make life easier. They're here to wake you up. It's the contradiction we all live with. You crave connection, but your soul craves evolution. And evolution rarely feels good. It comes with heartbreak, betrayal, endings. It comes with the kind of rupture that makes you question everything, your worth, your path, your past. but that's the doorway. And pain is the key. Jung knew this. He believed that we're not here to become perfect, we're here to become whole. And wholeness doesn't happen through ease. It happens when your illusions shatter, when your comfort zones collapse, when the identity you built to protect yourself no longer fits the truth you're growing into. The ego wants to avoid discomfort. It tells you to chase the person who gives butterflies, to run from the one who challenges your patterns. It equates intensity with intimacy and silence with safety. But the soul isn't fooled by performance. It seeks depth, not decoration. It knows that the person who triggers your growth might feel like a threat, not a fantasy. And that's where most people resist. They cling to ego comfort, hoping love will soothe rather than shape them. But the soul doesn't want soothing, it wants awakening. And so the universe sends you what will break the shell, not what will keep you inside it. When you finally stop chasing what feels good and start following what feels real, even when it hurts, that's when everything changes. You meet people who challenge you to rise, not shrink, who hold up a mirror, not a mask, who love you not for who you pretend to be, but for who you're still becoming. And that is the kind of growth your soul came here for. You didn't just fall for them, you fell for the idea of them. The story you wrote in your mind before the truth had a chance to speak. That's the trap no one warns you about. We don't fall in love with people as they are. We fall in love with what we project onto them: savior, soulmate, fixer, healer, mirror. You saw what you wanted to see, needed to see, and in doing so, you stopped seeing them at all. Carl Jung taught that projection is a natural process. We assign pieces of ourselves, our desires, our wounds, our dreams, onto others. And without knowing it, we give them roles in a story they never auditioned for. We fall for what we hope they are, not what they show us. And when they inevitably fail to live up to that script, we call it betrayal. But maybe it was expectation. Maybe they were never playing the role we imagined in the first place. Think about it. The one you called a soulmate. Was it love, or was it familiarity disguised as destiny? The one you believed would save you, was it safety, or was it your fear of saving yourself? The one you tried to fix, was it compassion, or was it control? We project because we're still trying to fill spaces within ourselves, spaces we haven't yet sat with long enough to understand. So we outsource our healing. We assign others the task of completing our story. But they were never meant to carry that weight, and neither were you. When the projection fades, and it always does, we're left with two choices: blame them for not being what we imagined, or take responsibility for what we created in our minds. The first path leads to bitterness, the second to wisdom. Because the moment you stop assigning roles, you begin to see people clearly, and, more importantly, you begin to see yourself. Illusions feel like love at first. They speak your language, they echo your longings, they offer just enough truth to keep the fantasy alive. But illusions don't sustain. They seduce, then collapse. And when they do, it's not just the person you lose, it's the version of reality you wrapped around them. The wrong person often arrives not to complete you, but to expose the difference between what you want to believe and what's actually true. They pull you into the high of potential, only to crash you into the wall of reality. And in that breaking, something important is revealed. How far you were willing to go to avoid seeing clearly. You stayed because of hope. You stayed because of history. You stayed because leaving meant admitting that it was never what you imagined. But there is a sacredness in that crash, in the unraveling of illusion. Because what breaks is not your capacity for love, it's your attachment to false versions of it. Sometimes it takes being shattered to finally see. When everything you thought was real crumbles, and you're left sitting in the ruins of your expectations, that's when truth whispers. And it doesn't say, "You were a fool." It says, "Now you're awake." Carl Jung believed that illusions are defenses, protective veils over the deeper work we're not yet ready to face. But life has a way of removing those veils. Through endings, through disappointment, through the sting of a love that never really saw you. And while it feels like loss, it's actually liberation. Because once the illusion breaks, you stop begging reality to match your fantasy. You stop bending to fit a dream that was never mutual. And most importantly, you stop betraying your own clarity just to feel loved. It hurts. Of course it does. But after the pain, there's vision. And with vision, there's choice. You don't need another illusion. You need something real. There's a moment, quiet but seismic, when everything changes. It's not when they apologize. It's not when they finally understand what they did. It's when you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "What did this teach me about myself?" That's the moment you shift from victim to creator. That's the moment you stop bleeding and start building. As long as you're focused on their choices, their betrayal, their absence, you stay tethered to the wound. And yes, it's human to ache, to replay, to want justice. But healing doesn't come from unraveling their story. It comes from rewriting yours. The person who hurt you may never change. They may never acknowledge what they broke, but you can. And when you do, you begin the most important work of your life, not changing the past, but reclaiming your power in the present. Carl Jung believed that every external conflict points inward to a forgotten part of ourselves waiting to be seen. So ask yourself, what part of you allowed it? What belief said, "This is the best I can get"? What old wound whispered, "Stay, because love means suffering"? That's where the alchemy happens, not in the blame, in the awareness. The story of "they did this to me" ends in helplessness. But the story of "this revealed what I needed to heal" ends in freedom. You become the author, not the character, the sculptor, not the marble. This isn't about dismissing pain. It's about owning what you do with it. Victims wait to be rescued. Creators build something sacred from the wreckage. And when you make that shift, everything changes. You're not powerless. You never were. You were just waiting to remember. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating every part of you, the light, the shadow, the rage, the tenderness. And strangely, the wrong people often become the invitation, not because they offer love, but because they provoke the parts of you that haven't yet awakened. It's not their kindness that changes you. It's their chaos. It's the way they disrupt the version of you that needed approval to feel safe. It's the way they pull at your oldest fears, forcing you to either collapse or rise. Individuation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And the wrong person? They press against the fractures. They test the boundaries you haven't set. They speak to the parts of you that still seek love in familiar pain. And in doing so, they expose what's unfinished, what's unclaimed, what's still waiting to be brought home. The path to wholeness isn't lit by comfort. It's carved through contrast. You can't integrate your shadow until it shows up in front of you, wearing a charming smile and echoing your deepest wounds. And once it does, once you see that this isn't about them, it's about you, the process begins. You start saying no where you used to stay silent. You walk away instead of waiting to be chosen. You stop seeking mirrors in others because you've begun to see yourself clearly. Pain becomes the doorway. Loss becomes the initiation. And you become the witness to your own becoming. That's the paradox. The people who broke you also revealed you. They cracked open the path back to your wholeness. So no, they weren't the love of your life, but they were the lesson of your becoming. You reach a point where the familiar ache no longer feels like love, where chaos stops feeling like passion, where silence, once mistaken for safety, now sounds like avoidance. That's the moment the universe has been waiting for, when you finally stop settling, not because you're bitter, but because you've remembered your worth. The wrong people always come first, not as punishment, but as preparation. They show you all the places where you abandon yourself. They expose your hunger, your hope, your hidden longing to be chosen, even if it means shrinking to fit. But after enough heartbreak, enough pretending, enough bending to be loved, you don't collapse anymore. You rise. And when you do, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing. You stop negotiating with red flags. You stop performing for love that requires an audience. You no longer tolerate halfway affection or apologies wrapped in excuses. The people who once felt magnetic now feel misaligned, not because they changed, but because you did. Carl Jung believed that true transformation comes not by fixing what's broken, but by outgrowing what no longer fits. That's what this chapter of your life is, a quiet refusal to shrink, to beg, to betray yourself, just to be held. You've done that dance, you know the steps by heart, and now you're choosing stillness over survival. You finally see that real love doesn't require performance. It doesn't ask you to dim your light or dilute your truth. It holds space for all of you, the fire and the fragility, the voice and the silence. But to recognize that love, you first had to stop confusing pain with connection. So yes, the wrong people came first. They had to. They were the contrast that taught you discernment. And now, when the right one arrives, you won't lose yourself trying to keep them. You'll simply be, and they'll meet you there. No fireworks, no applause, no dramatic moment of clarity, just a slow, steady shift deep inside you. A quiet revolution. One day you wake up and realize you don't want what you used to crave. The chaos, the longing, the desperation for connection. It's been replaced, not by someone else, but by you, by your own presence, your own peace. This is the part no one talks about, the stillness after the storm, the soft power that comes from facing yourself fully, your wounds, your triggers, your patterns. You didn't run this time, you stayed, you looked, you listened, and slowly you stopped seeking salvation in someone else's arms. You started embodying it. Carl Jung taught that the journey of becoming whole begins with integration, not escape. And when you integrate your shadow, when you stop denying the parts you once rejected, you stop asking others to complete you. You stop bleeding on people who didn't cut you. You stop chasing highs that mask your lows, because now you're anchored. You don't need someone to come and rescue you from your loneliness. You've made peace with it. You've walked through the silence and discovered it was never emptiness. It was space for truth. The love you were looking for out there, it's been blooming in you all along. And here's what's beautiful. The moment you stop looking to be saved, you attract people who don't want to save you. They want to meet you fully, authentically, soul to soul, because you're no longer projecting need, you're radiating wholeness. This quiet revolution can't be seen from the outside, but it changes everything, your energy, your choices, your boundaries, and most of all, your standards. You don't rise with noise, you rise with clarity. And now, you don't need love. You're finally ready to receive it. You thought it was punishment. You thought the universe had forgotten you, left you wandering in the wreckage of almost loves and almost healings. But now you see it. It wasn't cruelty. It was a curriculum. Every wrong person, every broken promise, every silent ending, it was all part of your becoming. They weren't detours. They were initiations. You didn't just survive them. You transformed because of them. Because they didn't just break your heart. They broke the illusion. They stripped away the fantasy, the stories, the unconscious patterns that had you believing you had to earn love, chase it, suffer for it. And what was left? You, raw, real, radiant in your own truth. Carl Jung once said that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and that's what this journey has been, a coming home to consciousness, a descent into the shadow so you could reclaim the light. You were never being rejected, you were being redirected not toward another person, but toward yourself. Now, you don't beg, you don't prove. You don't wait for someone else to choose you first. You walk with your head high, not because you're hardened, but because you're healed. And love? Love no longer feels like a rescue mission. It feels like resonance. The gift hidden in heartbreak is this. It forces you to face what you once feared most, being alone with yourself, and shows you that your own presence is more than enough. that your soul is not a half waiting to be filled, but a hole that deserves to be met. You're no longer looking for someone to fix what's broken. You're inviting someone to walk with you in what's already whole. And that shift, that's everything. That's the difference between love that drains and love that expands. So if you're standing at the end of another painful chapter wondering if anything good can come from this, hear this truth clearly. The universe hasn't been punishing you. It's been preparing you. And now you're not just ready to love. You're ready to receive the kind of love that aligns with who you've become. Not the love you begged for, the love that meets you exactly where you are. And finally, you're ready. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even more shocking.